Hello, everybody, and welcome back to yet another very exciting episode of the Friends Talking Fantasy Podcast. My name is Charles, and with me today, as always, is my lifelong friend and co-host, Dylan.
Ready to talk some fantasy with my friend Charles.
Yes, I'm ready to talk some fantasy with my friend as well, Dylan, and not just any fantasy today, because
Ooh.
today we are here to do our first book discussion since we've been back, and that is The Daughter's War by Christopher Buehlman.
That's exactly what it is, Charles. Yeah, this was the pick from our earlier Friends Pitching Fantasy episode. Check
Hmm.
that one out on YouTube or your fancy or your podcast app of choice.
Hmm.
But yeah, I was super excited to get into this one because it is the prequel to The Blacktongue Thief, also by Christopher Buehlman. And we we loved the Blacktongue Thief for many, many reasons.
Hmm.
Uh, Part of them are just Christopher Buehlman's incredible writing style, his compelling characters, all that kind of stuff. Also, for Buehlman's amazing sense of humor in that book. It hits that kind of grimdark humor part of the Venn diagram where those two things meet, which is like a la Joe Abercrombie. So then
Hmm.
we knew we were heading into a totally different kind of book when we were getting into the Daughter's War, because this one is grim, but it is not meant to be funny, or it doesn't try to pull you out of the darkness at
Yeah,
any moment. It just leaves you in the muck and the filth and the
right.
incredibly vivid violence and disaster that take place throughout. And Buellman's skills are completely on display, but in a totally different way than in The Blacktongue Thief.
That's well said, Dylan. I mean, this is a book that's pretty much about finding moments to enjoy life even in the most
Mm.
dire of circumstances. And so the way that Christopher Buehlman approached that was to make this pretty much as depressing of a story for as much of the story as you can imagine. And then there are moments that are funny, there are moments of tenderness and intimacy and also of, dare I say, happiness, but they are few and far
Mm.
between. And yeah, like you said, Dylan, this has been highly anticipated. I held on to this book for months before we went on hiatus, and that I purposefully avoided reading it because I knew we were going to talk about it on the show, and it's been taunting me on my shelf for months. I've wanted to dive in so bad. I've ever since we read Blacktongue Thief, I've become a huge Buehlman fan, and I read Between Two Fires, which we talked about on the show. And over the hiatus, I read The Lesser Dead, which is one of his just straight up vampire horror stories as well. Um, and now here we are with The Daughter's War. Super exciting. I think we can get started by just kind of maybe reading a little bit of the synopsis. We'll kick it off spoiler free for anyone thinking of checking it out, and then we'll quickly go into all the spoiler
Yeah.
filled conversation that we want to have. And so this is The Daughter's War by Christopher Buehlman, and here is the summary from inside the book. The goblins have killed all of our horses and most of our men. They have enslaved our cities, burned our fields, and still they wage war. Now our daughters take up arms. Galva, or Galvicha to her three brothers, two of whom the goblins will kill, has defied her family's wishes and joined the army's untested new unit, the Raven Knights. They march towards a once beautiful city overrun by the goblin horde, accompanied by scores of giant war corvids. Made with the darkest magics, these fearsome blackbirds may hold the key to stopping the goblins in their war to make cattle of mankind. The road to victory is bloody, and goblins are clever and merciless. The Raven Knights can take nothing for granted, not the bonds of family, nor the wisdom of their leaders, nor their own safety against the dangerous warbirds at their side. But some hopes are worth any risk.
That is interesting. I actually never read the synopsis of the book.
Mhm.
So there's a couple of pieces in there that surprised me. One of is that they talked about that two of her brothers are gonna get killed by
Yeah.
goblins. That is a very specific thing to give away. Like
Mhm.
number of uh, I mean, I would call it a spoiler if it wasn't in the synopsis. I
Yeah.
definitely would never have
Well,
said that during the spoiler-free segment, and if it were not a synopsis, which is totally fair game. So that's interesting, the choice to give that one away. And
it says
also,
right in the first chapter that she'll lose all her friends and
yes,
two of her brothers. That's like the
yes, you're
fourth
right.
line
I'm
in this
remembering that
book.
now. Yeah.
Um, and yeah, I agree. I mean, it's interesting because this is, I think the place we should start is like what the very interesting, like POV narrator
Hmm.
style of this book. So most people reading this have read The Blacktongue Thief, which came out a few years before this in 2021, and she was like she was a main character, but she was not a POV. She was like the partner in the adventure, right? She was like the stoic soldier who
The foil, I would say, to Kinch,
yes,
our
to
real, I would say she was like the, was the word like there's deuteragonist or something, right? Like there's like a uh,
what? I
the
don't know that
this
word.
the number two to the number one that is the
Mm.
protagonist. There's like the
Mm.
do it's like there's a word for it. But anyway, go on. I'll
I
look
will
it up.
take your word for it. And so I think Buehlman has talked about this on social media a bit, where he's like, I wanted to, grow this series. But to do that, I really was focused on growing Galva's character because she was that foil doo-doo whatever character in the Blacktongue Thief. And now she is
I'm
getting her
just
own time to
you
shine.
say due to that's not what I meant when I said the number two character.
No, I know. I'm just
I did not mean doo doo, but I do mean yeah, deuteragonist, if that's how it's pronounced, is a second
Deuteragonist.
deuteragonist, I think, is a second most important character in a
Mm.
story, known as a secondary main character.
Well,
There
I
you
learned
go.
something today. Thank you for that. That's the word of the day.
This is a key moment for you, Charles, in your Bildungsroman? What is that? What
Yeah,
is that
there is
it?
a buildings Roman, but I'm in my 30s, so I think the time for that story has well passed. But
Bildungsroman. You're still developing. These are still your formative years of spiritual
that's
education,
true.
Charles. I
Yeah.
consider it a Bildungsroman for
Okay.
you, and
Yeah,
this
in
is a
that
key moment.
definition, and absolutely, absolutely.
Mhm.
And so, what's interesting is because it's a prequel, you could start with this. There's nothing stopping you. I always recommend reading in publisher order, but this is new and hot, and so you can pick it up and check it out. And it's told during a time of war. I think that's the big thing about it that's different to Black Tongue. I would also say, like, is one of the things I wanted to talk about is its comparison to Black Tongue, and I think we can do that
Yeah.
in the spoiler-free version since some people probably read Black Tongue and are considering Daughter's War. And Dylan, I know you had some reservations going into Daughter's War about the shift in tone. Maybe we want to revisit that here.
I would like to revisit that because I'll start with just saying this book was incredibly well written.
Hmm.
Christopher Buehlman killed it. I think now that I'm two books into his catalog, I know you're far more than me, but I would be very willing to say like, okay, I'm very clearly a Christopher Buehlman fan. I'm
Hmm.
at the point of the next thing he comes out is immediately jumping very near to the top of my TBR kind of thing.
Hmm.
So that's awesome. I will say though, to me, the humor of Blacktongue Thief made it stronger read for me. Like
Hmm.
I still like I'm pretty much like friend of the show Mark Lawrence. I'm pretty generous with throwing like 5 stars on Goodreads. Like if it was a very good book, I'm still
Yeah.
giving 5 stars, and I gave that to The Daughter's War.
Hmm.
But I would say for me, the Black Tongue Thief's humor put it at that kind of more almost elite tier of my personal tastes.
Hmm.
This one was it was really interesting. I really appreciate the realism of it, I guess. Like there's
Mhm.
plenty of moments, and we'll get into those in the spoiler section, but like plenty of moments where there's like the kind of easier, more triumphant, or at least like more narratively satisfying uh, to the reader, I guess, like choice that a that Buehlman could have gone with, and he purposefully does not choose some of the things
Mhm.
that could have been more satisfying. Like, and I don't want to provide details yet, but it's like, a certain character could get vengeance on another character or something like that, and
Yeah.
instead that character might die, but they might die in another way that won't be nearly as satisfying to the reader, but also fits really well with what I consider to be a key point of the Daughters War, which is that war is not full of meaning and
Yeah.
like satisfying hero narratives and cohesive like stories. It is chaos and just grim and full of just horrible things
Yeah.
happening for seemingly no reason and in no consistent way. I mean, there are moments where Galva says, like, I don't consider this all random. Like, I do consider my life to have some sort of like narrative to it
Yeah.
or themes and meaning, and those are there, but just generally it's like, no, in war things don't just like go in these heroic ways. Like they go in this just completely chaotic way that doesn't fit with what would be most like exciting or like satisfying. And in that, the point is driven home really well. Then the question
Right.
becomes, as a reader, do you enjoy that as much? But
Right.
yeah, Charles, your thoughts comparing to Blacktongue Thief. Yeah, did you have a preference? Where are you coming down on Daughter's War and Blacktongue Thief?
Yeah, that's a good question. For me, I think it comes down to what you're getting at is the reason I'm such a big Buehlman fan is it's all about the writing style. Like you'll see a lot of this is like, oh, prose, love Buehlman's prose. He's like a lot of the reviews praise him for that. For me to take
Mm-hmm.
it to that another step to kind of go along what you're talking about of the kind of story he's choosing to tell, it's almost like performative in nature. Like he takes on Galva as like a her character, and this story is
Mm-hmm.
her retelling of what's happened to her. It is very purposeful and very committed. And it's almost this performance level kind of thing of like, I'm telling you my story about the time I
Mm-hmm.
was at war against the goblins, and here was my perspective. And Galva has her own experiences and reflections on those moments that she's
Mm-hmm.
weaving into it. And she's the kind of character that would not give herself the accolades of like, ooh, I maybe wanted to go out and get revenge on this person,
Right.
or I had my epic moment here. Like she is still that kind of reserved, modest person in some level,
Mm-hmm.
but she's trying to tell the story of her accomplishment or her experiences in war, some of which are very accomplished, right? And she's not willing to give herself some of those big windfall moments that you were kind of describing that a traditional fantasy story might have. So it's that commitment that one makes this like very poetic for me,
Mm-hmm.
and two, when we talk about character building, it makes it like super top tier. And so it creates this huge tonal shift from Blacktongue Thief that you were talking about, which I think is a bold thing to do as an author, right? It's like you're in the same world. You're calling
Yeah.
it a prequel, but you are having a total tonal shift so that people that were fans of Black Tongue Thief for the main character Kinch or for the humor are now being thrust into another story from a different perspective and a totally different voice. And that for
Mm-hmm.
me is super interesting and rewarding, but I could see as like a casual fan, it's a rift there. But I feel like anyone who is a fan of that series and is willing to give this a shot is going to have an absolutely terrific time.
Yeah, I still highly recommend this book. I just wouldn't say go into it thinking you're getting the Black Tongue Thief all over again. And I think that commitment to character, because when you're talking about Galva and how close this is to her perspective. I mean, it's
Mhm.
kind of a uh, yeah, it's as close as you can really get. The whole voice is her telling a story, besides some moments that are actually more epistolary, right, Charles?
Oh yeah,
They're
nice.
right. So,
I'd say so.
but for the most part, it is just her voice completely, and it wouldn't make sense to keep that humor really alive in that. And Blacktongue Thief is just as close in terms of voice and commitment to character, but that character is super funny and he's a rascal. So you get that humor just naturally in the voice. So it's really impressive in terms of showing Buehlman's range. Like he is a uh, really versatile author, right? He's very accomplished in horror. Now he's bringing stuff to fantasy, and he just gives each story what he thinks it most needs. And if
Mhm.
that means just a teaspoon of humor instead of a dollop, then that's what he's going to do.
Exactly.
And he won't look back. So really impressed with this book. Just going on. This is dark and dreary, and it's like and gritty, and it's like I feel like I'm using all these grimdark
Yeah, yeah.
buzzwords,
Mm.
but I will say there's certain books that fit that, but then
Yeah.
something about the tone of it, even if all the
Yeah.
events are also dark and
Mm.
gritty, something about the tone of some books makes it not feel like you are so much in the muck of that.
Yeah.
So I would say like the Abercrombie books fit with that, even though they just as much like they are grim, all this stuff. It's like, but there's just a difference when the voice is like humorous and stuff. And then I would say that this book, you got to be ready to just be crawling through the muck the
Yeah.
whole time with barely like a hint of, like you said, Charles, humor and happiness and those kind of things. And really those feel just there to almost, yeah, make that point you're trying to say about the theme of like how to find a teensy bit of that during
Mm.
times that are overwhelmingly horrible to experience. So
Yeah.
yeah, there's some of that that I would be interested in bringing up
Yeah,
in
and
the spoiler
there's
section,
a
more
lot of
details. But
like really mature content too. I feel like there's like the world of grim dark and fantasy. That's one way of like this is the reality of a fantasy series. If someone gets stabbed, it's going to be brutal and painful or whatever. But in this, it's very much weaving in those horror elements, and it's meant to put
yeah,
you in a mood of hopelessness. And also, like a lot of the what happens is very shocking. There's, people
hmm
being eaten alive. There's brutal battle scenes where he focuses on details of like, people crying for their moms or dads or,
hmm
it's like really intense in that way. There's like sexual assault and rape and all those things as well. It's all like everything bad about
death of
war is
animals,
told here.
which
Death
can
of
be like
animals.
that's a lot of people find that a lot harder to deal with
Yeah.
than death of people
Yeah.
in
And
stories. So
there's some tough ones in there. So there's a lot
yeah.
of really, difficult, mature content scenes in here. And again, the book ultimately is about hope. Like even it kind of says in the synopsis, some hopes are worth any risk. And I think a lot of it is Galva finding herself in all of these moments. And we can get more into that in the spoiler version, but it's not just gore and misery and violence for like for just purely shock value. It really brings home a very nuanced, mature theme
Mhm.
delivered in a poetic, thoughtful way. And
Well
so
said.
that's why I would highly recommend it. It's not just like trying to shock you and show you the spectacular violence. It's part of what makes it particularly intense is how muted and understated it can be sometimes.
Yeah, yeah, I totally agree. And that was really well said, Charles, because
Mhm.
as dark and violent as it is, it never feels like any choice is made just for the shock value of it.
Yeah.
Like the choices are very deliberate, and I I really appreciated that about Buehlman's choices with the Daughter's War. Last thing I wanted to get in, I think while we're in the spoiler free
Mhm.
section, Charles, would
Yeah.
be uh, what, if you had to speculate,
Yeah.
what do you think motivated Buehlman to go back and make this prequel
Mhm.
about Galva rather
Yeah.
than I heard from one of our YouTube comments from Heidi, one of our longtime listeners, like that
Mhm.
uh, the next book is going to be picking up where the Blacktongue Thief left off.
Mhm.
So why go back to do a prequel about Galva
Sure.
before going forward again?
Yeah, I think some of it, that's a great question. I can only speculate based off of what I've seen, like what Christopher Buehlman said on like
Yeah.
social media and like kind of picking it up from there. What I think is he I think it's two things. First, Christopher Buehlman in
Hmm.
my eyes is truly an artist and he had this inspiration to tell Galva's story, and that's what drove him to write this book. That's like the main thing that I like to speculate. The second thing is, if he's picking up a sequel, I think he wanted to feature Galva more, and the more he
Hmm.
was developing a sequel, the more he saw the need to go back, flesh out the character, flesh out the history, so that the story can go beyond just like continuing to pick up Kinch's sequential story to just have that context and have that history kind of laid out. And I'm sure as he was doing that, he's like, I'm cooking right now. I'm writing a pretty good book. And so release that prequel and tell that story. That would be my guess based on only what I've seen on social media and what I can speculate from reading both books.
Totally agree. And I think maybe a better way I could have asked that question rather than trying to get at an author we don't know's motivation would have been to ask, what does this accomplish?
Yeah,
That
uh-huh.
going next to the following book would not
Yeah.
have accomplished. And I don't know if you change, like, I think what you named is what it accomplishes, which is we know Galva so intimately now. And there
Yeah.
was a sense after the Blacktongue Thief that I was like, who is Galva
Yeah.
though?
And
And
Christopher's
we
committed to the
knew, yeah.
character, so it's not like, oh, I'm going to like have this scene at the fireplace where Galva just uncharacteristically
Right.
spills her innermost insecurities and memories. Like Galva keeps it locked down and professional, she's now a veteran soldier. So Christopher's probably like, there's never going to be an honest character moment
Yeah.
where I can give you as much detail
Right.
about her as I would want you to have, is my guess.
Yep. That's well said, Charles.
Mhm.
I think I'm ready to get into some spoiler territory. If you are, you look like you are, Charles. So I'll
Yeah.
give my spoiler warning. If you haven't yet read The Daughter's War and probably The Blacktongue Thief, but I doubt we'll get too deep into spoilers from Blacktongue Thief, but won't hold back on that either. So if you haven't read those and you don't want to get those spoiled for you, now's a good time to I say turn this down in your headphones. I guess like now I'll say click away from this YouTube video or leave
Now's
it
a
on to pump up our numbers, that watch time.
now's a
Just
good chance
mute
to like
it,
and
leave it
subscribe.
on. Now's a fantastic chance to like and subscribe and all of that kind of stuff and
Drop a comment. Are you going to pick up this
drop a
book now?
comment.
Let us know what you
Yes.
guys think. Uh,
Nice, nice. We're booktubers now that you said that. So, anyway, we're going into spoilers now. You've been warned. So, Charles, where's a good place to start in
I
this
think we
conversation?
were hit. We were cooking on Galva as a main character, and I think now that we are in spoiler territory, we can get more into some of the nuances of her character that we were able to get from reading this book that may bring into a sequel to the Blacktongue Thief, right? Of like what did we get from having a Galva prequel story?
Hmm. What did we get by having Galva Prequel story? Yeah, we got, like we said, we got a lot more understanding of who Galva is as a person. I wonder if the next book, like the book three, which is the first sequel,
Mm.
would maybe even do like a rotating point of view. Would be interesting between
Yeah.
Kenshin and Galva. I think that what we got was an understanding of why Galva is the way that she is, and why she's I don't want to use the word humorless, but like why she's this very like staid person who's kind of coming in with this seen it all, been there, done that attitude as she is in the Blacktongue Thief. And I think that we also just got a very, I think, I don't know, the word touching almost
Yeah.
comes to mind, like a very
Yeah.
touching story about a character that isn't very sentimental in nature,
Yeah.
which is a difficult thing to pull off.
I I agree completely. I think there's this idea that there was a quote in here, something like, and I think I have it, I had to write it down separately, where it was, I do not need to be loved as deeply as I
Mm,
love, and I
that was
do
toward
not
the end.
need to speak of it. And that's kind of said relatively early in the story, and it's this idea of like, I'm not going to
That said
vocal.
early?
Is
I
it?
thought she said that when went back to see
Maybe
her
halfway.
like
Yeah.
the horse, right? There's the
Oh, did you say that
I
at
thought it was
all the
like
way in
the
the
end.
epilogue?
That was like
I love the
yes, I think
epilogue.
that was in the epilogue.
Oh yeah. Oh, pff, it's one of the last lines of the whole freaking book.
Yes.
I did. Okay. Yeah. Yeah. So it's like, oh yeah. I mean, if we want to jump all the way to the epilogue, it's such a good moment. But
Oh yeah, why not?
it's kind of like what we were saying in the spoiler free of like this book is so depressing and so dark and so many horrible things happen that this epilogue is that moment. Even that in the synopsis is teasing some hopes are worth any risk. It's like I think Galva was struggling, even though she doesn't get therapy and realize I was struggling with my the stuff
Well,
I was
that's in book
going through
three.
in war. Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
That's a
But
therapy
she
session.
ends up going home to like the last
Yeah.
horse like in
Hmm.
existence that is an older horse and that she used to ride when she was
Yeah.
younger and she was able to come back from war and she even said the lady of the house has come back from war and so then I took in her good scent and stroked her. Idala, I guess is the horse, had now pressed the whole of her body against the fence as she might have done when I was a girl, so I could disobey my governess and ride her. She was, of course, too old for riding now. I just laid my head against her and her wet coat with glad tears, which again, tears is not a characteristic of Galva like at all. There's only a few moments where she even has cried. I wondered in her long empty days up here, did she wish something, anything would happen, as I had so often wished I could just stand on exactly this hill and do nothing. Had she missed my hand on her flank or full of apple for her? Was I in her dreams as often as she was in mine? I do not know. I do not need to be loved as deeply as I love, and I do not need to speak of it. All I know is that she remembered me in this moment, and one moment is all there ever is. And then, of course, it goes on a little farther. But I mean, that is like, wow, what a way to
I
end
got
a
chills.
what a way to
Legit
end a
chills.
story, dude. Like it's
Oh,
chilling, right? And then of
it
course this
is.
the assistant comes up and says, "Your father's waiting for you." And the last line is, "My father will wait,"
Yeah.
which is like her finally being able to enjoy the moment that she is in, which I think the pressures of
Yeah.
war and her family had distracted her from, and even her own ability to like process where she's at mentally, right? Because she doesn't understand I'm not taking in the moment because of all these worries that I have. Like she hasn't processed that throughout most of the book. And so she had to take on her family. She had to fight like and through the and
Yeah.
suffer like horrible injuries and lose loved ones to be able to come home and have a moment that she can just be with her horse where she was when she was a child. And then that point of like, does the horse wonder like want to go on adventures as much as I want to stay here and be with her, where it's like we
Mm.
all want different things at different moments, but this key to actually finding happiness in this horrible world is to just enjoy where you're at. It was a really touching way to end a story like this.
Yeah, extremely touching. And I think that there's also Galva has a lot of wisdom, I think, especially by the
Yeah.
end of this.
Mhm.
And that sticks out a lot to me. Like she externally, and I think also even how she perceives herself can come off as this very, I guess, I don't want to say this, just like I'm a soldier, like
Mhm.
I
Stoic.
fight, I'm stoic, all this kind of stuff. And then you get into her ways of seeing the world, and they're super deep and
Mhm.
super wise. Like
Mhm.
there's moments like the one that you just mentioned, but there's also moments where uh, she starts worshiping the god of death,
Mhm.
and she uh, is talking like she thinks about kind of the hypocrisies in her experience of being like, I'm still sad when people, or like her Raven, uh, Corvid, I guess would be the word they'd use, uh, died, right? Like she's still
Yeah.
saddened by that kind of stuff, and she's like, yeah,
Yeah.
like someone who's really fully bought in to this line of worship, there's not supposed to feel that way or act like that, but she also doesn't really like scold herself too much for it, because she's
Yeah.
like, well, like I'm human. What am I supposed to, like I'm doing my best
Yeah.
here, but what am I supposed to do? Just not feel sad when someone I care about dies? Like,
Yeah.
and you'd think of her almost as this knight-like, paladin-like figure from the outside that would be like, I take my oath really seriously, like
Mhm.
this is how I see the world, black and white kind of thing. But she's super deep and nuanced in
Yeah.
how she actually thinks about the world.
Yeah, and I think you tapped into a really powerful part of this book. It's the narrating style of we get the Galva from Blacktongue Thief
Mhm.
writing backwards in this prequel story, and you get to see that introspection that she has, that wisdom that she has looking back on what she was going through at the time. So some of this character development is like her telling the story of a 20-year-old her, and then some of it is also her coming to terms with her past, you could say her trauma, if you will, of like
Yeah.
coming to like heal from that. And then there's a good quote here that taps into what you were describing. It was the only other one. Well, I highlighted two other ones, but this is the only other one that's like I highlighted for poetic Christopher Buehlman's A Master reasons. And it's and this was when she was like getting drunk and at the and like partying and but like while they were under siege. And she
Mhm.
goes, I think now that I acted pridefully, that I was showing off, but I would forgive another 20-year-old this,
Yeah.
and so I forgive myself. This has been a
Right.
hard skill to learn, the forgiving of self, and it is not always easy to know when it is good and when it is indulgent. But there is not so much time in life that we should spend it being sorry. It was a
Mhm.
glorious hour or so in a time of fear and horror, and I would not trade the memory of it for a feeling that I had behaved more properly. Such things are good in moderation. Moderation, too, is good in moderation.
Yeah, that's such a great line. I remember that one, Charles. Are we sure Galva hasn't been to therapy? Like she's gonna start dropping some buzzwords too
She may
before too
invent
long.
therapy in this world.
Yeah, it's like these are extremely nuanced and thoughtful takes on just like one's own psychological experience, and what it means, self forgiveness and self compassion,
Mhm.
and just what is a life worth living involve. Like, do you really
Mhm.
want to look back and say, well, I did the right thing in that moment? Like, I was proper, I was what I was supposed to be doing? Or do you want to look back and just say, hey, I was in the middle of a horrible war and I allowed myself to just be a little free and have some fun? And
Yeah.
it's it's just not what I expected from the Galva we came to know in the Blacktongue Thief, and maybe that we
Right.
didn't come to know at the level that we thought we did.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. And it's one of the things that makes me such a huge Christopher Buehlman fan. It's just the way that he writes and the way he develops these characters, and it he's touching on something very true. And one of the main payoffs of all of this is because of how much she's gone through, the way the narration is constructed, like just all of it coming together in a way that you can connect with emotionally. It's such a hard thing to do as an author, and I respect it absolutely. And her understanding herself, is a huge part of her character. But I think there's like two other things about her character that I think are super interesting. And one is her like family dynamics, which is a
Mm,
huge part of the story. And the other one is her like relationships and her
yeah.
own identity as it is with like being in relationships with other people in this world. And both I think are something that a Galva in Blacktongue Thief would be pretty guarded about. And even
Mhm.
in this, sometimes she's like, I tried to write a poem, but I'm not going to share it with you. Or
Mhm.
here, just read what my brother had to say about it
Yeah.
because I don't like, he tells it better than I could. It's like, those are like the Galva character moments that, we're kind of used to. And then we get to peel back some of the layers when we get to see what her experience actually was. And so I just think the balance of that is super interesting.
Yeah, the family piece is key because there's this kind of I think where it sticks out a lot is when she's finally completely done with her brother. Jeez, this is gonna be a struggle to try to say, but
We tried to get the controllers.
Mehead, me,
Yeah.
I,
M I
yeah, give me
G
some
A E with an accent D.
D.
But
Mehead.
the accent
It's
is
like
heavy.
yeah, it is heavy. So either way, a she's finally completely done with him, and he'd kind of like mouthed to her like, you're not my sister. And there's this like half brother half sister thing that she's always trying to balance, right? That
Right.
they okay, does that make him my brother, does it not? I mean, it's interesting. Like I have two half brothers, and
Hmm.
like I'll say this stuff kind of hit me because I've always describe them as brothers. Like I would never, if I was talking about my like brother Justin or my brother Bradley, those are my like technically half brothers.
Hmm.
Outside of the context I'm in now, where I'm trying to specify something about half brother versus brother,
Yeah.
I'd always just say, "Oh, my brother Justin like came to visit" or
Yeah.
something like
You'd
that,
say you
right?
have X number of brothers. You wouldn't
Like
distinguish between.
yes,
Yeah.
I have three older brothers, right?
Yeah. There
I
you
wouldn't
go.
say I have two half brothers and one brother unless it had some relevance to something we're
Yeah.
talking about, like now.
Hmm.
Like, and to me, it would have always felt weird to specify, like, uh, be like, oh, my half brother Justin came to visit. Be like, what? Why are you like? What kind of distance are you trying to create by
Hmm.
even calling
Yeah.
them your half brother rather than just saying, oh, my brother?
Hmm.
So with her, there's a lot of like back and forth between brother, half brother, and then eventually at the end of the book, after he'd like kind of mouthed, "You're not my sister," she starts calling him her not brother.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like
Right.
oh, my not brother like ran away, and he was in that he's in a kind of like a fortressy kind of thing, or house or something. But either way, it's like my not brother was there, so I rang the bell so that the goblins could come and eat my not brother. Like
Exactly.
and that's such a key piece of what it means to relate to these people, and what family is about is the distinction in that language. I also do want to talk about the way that her not brother died, because I think that's
Yeah.
interesting too.
Yeah,
But
well,
yeah,
because I think you're onto something, Dylan, because there's also the implication of this is a fantasy world, and she's part of what you would consider a noble house, like this
Yeah.
Dom Braga house. Her dad is like the lead general in all of this war, a very, very noble house, and there's a lot that comes with that. There's image, there's prestige, there's the way you're treated. And so the fact that she has half siblings and that there is an oldest sibling is critical in this like
Hmm.
line of succession and like who's better than who, kind of who's like, next in line in this and that. And the fact also
Yeah.
she's the only daughter as
Hmm.
well is another piece to this. So there's like this gender component, and then there's this half sibling component that come together in this, call it feudal society, and it all is at play because she's balancing this fine line where yes, she is of a noble, let's say, house family, but
Hmm.
she's a woman. She's not the oldest. She's a half sibling, and that kind of molds her character in a very significant way.
Yeah, it definitely does. And it's interesting because she doesn't fit with the like traditional gender norm, what you
Mhm.
would expect from the daughter, the sole daughter of a noble family like this. And there's times where people kind of want to put her back into that place, but there's also this background that is they're desperate for people to fight the
Mhm.
goblins at this point, right? We're
Yeah,
out of horses. We're
yeah,
running pretty low on men,
yeah,
so it's time to get everyone that we can out there. So it's almost like she this time fit her personality way
yeah.
better. I think she would have been a fish out of water during times
Mhm.
of peace.
Mhm.
She does still face some barrier, some resistance as she tries to be like her genuine self. But the context that is this war against the goblins has enabled her to probably live a more authentic
Yeah,
and dangerous life as the only daughter of
right. And you
a
have me
noble.
thinking something I hadn't considered before with that point, Dylan. Let's think about her motivation at the start of this book to fight. It
Yeah.
was, I'm going to join this experimental unit to feel like I have a purpose amongst my family and in this world of I'm not just staying at home doing nothing. Like
Yeah.
she was going down one path of like, oh, I'm going to be a trained fighter, but it's like women aren't generally accepted in that role. She was able to join this experimental Corvid unit
Hmm.
as a way to get to the front lines and to stand out in a way that society would accept her. A lot of external reasons were motivating her. Certainly also to stand out in her father's eye as well and get acceptance there, and amongst her brothers too, was huge motivations. And that very early scene where they're all at dinner, and it's like, well, I have, a right to be here because I share the last name. I have this
Hmm.
tattoo that designates me as a respectable fighter, and now I'm part of this experimental unit. And so those are like the things that brought her into this war. And then think about her motivation at the end. She doesn't even acknowledge her brother by calling him by his name and just calling him my not brother. And then she
Yeah.
goes home. My father can wait. I want to spend
Yes.
time for me with the horse. And so I was actually, you bringing that up made me think that way of like, yeah, her motivation changes too, from why she entered the war to her breakthroughs by the end.
Yeah, totally. I mean, uh, both this piece about learning to savor the moment and learn to like live a life well lived by her own intrinsic values rather than these extrinsic ones, but also becomes very, I think, pro-social in her way of living. Like so much of it is just about like these atrocities that are occurring to people. I want to help with that, which is
Yeah.
like that's pretty cool and mature because she's reaching that point. She's still in like her early 20s,
Yeah.
where it would be very easy to continue to be motivated primarily by like I'm trying to prove myself and my family, blah blah blah. But she starts to also see her family way more for what they are by the
Yeah.
end of it,
Mhm.
where I thought it was really telling. I think this was epilogue too, where she was describing what happened to the pragmatist, what happened to the corvids that remained,
Yeah.
what happened, right? It's like, and she's saying, my father is one of these people that were making these decisions. And it's like the pragmatist basically had to be a scapegoat for like why some noble sons and daughters, I guess, were being killed because the pragmatist was the perfect person for the time of war, and was like, well, I just am going to use whatever troops for whatever purposes make the most sense. I'm not going to consider what their last
Mhm.
name is, or if they have it's like a Dom in their name, right? That would
Yeah.
be what makes them a noble. She's like, I'm not thinking
Yeah.
about if there's a Dom in their name. I'm just sending people to do the things that will be most effective, and some of them will die.
Yeah.
Um, but then at the end of the war, it's like you kill all these noble people, and she was stripped of her command and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so Galva hated that, and also that they basically did away with the corvids and the corvid
Mhm.
knights because well, besides Galva, everyone in that group was like not noble.
Yeah.
And it's like, wait, do we really want these not noble
Yeah.
people with the power that
Women
comes with a
too.
ridiculously women as well, like a ridiculously intelligent force of violent,
Yeah.
deadly birds
Yeah.
that could be used against us, the nobles, and they just
Yeah.
do away with it. And she's like,
Yeah.
this is horrible. Like, I was in the thick of it with all these people, and I'm not like facing the same level of punishment or like bad ramifications, but it's only because I have a Dom in my name, and like, screw my dad. Like, I think part
Yeah.
of the my father can wait isn't
Yeah.
just like I've learned to savor the moment. It's
Oh
also
yeah.
like that guy's not what he's not horrible. There's way worse out there, right? But
Yeah.
he's not whatever I might have idolized at the
Yeah.
beginning of this book. He's just
Right.
another like noble person who will, to keep himself in
Right.
power, push others down.
Right. No, you eloquently just like tied a bunch of those themes together, and that focal point is the end where they disassemble the army because it kind of
Yeah.
ties both of this idea of her family dynamics, how that has changed, the themes of her coming like building up her image of herself, and even like one of the things I want to get into right after this is talking about the villains of the story, right? Because
Definitely.
there's multiple villains. I feel like we're talking about the family right now, and so it's like you said, there were too many upstarts in the military. You have that prima general who was able to like lead the army to victory, but at the cost of treating people equally. And the nobles were like,
How dare
"What?
she?
Like, yeah, how dare you do that? You're gone." And then you have the brother Pole, the surviving eldest brother.
Hmm.
Miguel was totally like this hedonistic person who
Yeah.
abused the title of being the head of the family at war, abused the being in campaign and the things you can get away with, taking over this village, taking
Hmm.
advantage of it. Um, and so you could see how someone like Galva was able to write them off. I understand that that is just not a way, that is not an honorable way to be. That's not where my values are. Goodbye, detached from the family.
But that
Then you
took some
have
time too to
took
truly
to the
get there.
took to the very
Yeah.
end, basically. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
But I mean, Miguel did horrible things, killed her
Yes.
bird, didn't ever see her as family, and that's really what
Yeah.
was the changing moment. Because she was even ready to forgive him for killing the birds. She was like trying to be like, well, the birds can be dangerous around people, like, but then it's like, you're not my sister. It was like, oh, it's go time. Gloves are
The
off. Like,
nail in
let's
the
go.
coffin. Yeah.
Yeah, the nail in the coffin. And then I want to make sure we talk about Pole because Pole's ending, if you remember,
Yes.
he he realized that he became the general through the
Hmm.
politics of the world, right? And he saw the prima general step down. He effectively was taking her place. He was staying in line with the family. And in doing that, he kind of lost his self, that Galva was
Hmm.
able to maintain. He was always the dutiful son, always level-headed, always living up to the responsibilities of the house, being now the oldest son, but he missed his opportunity for love. He couldn't love the woman he wanted to. He felt an imposter in the role. He had respect for the prima general, and he ends up killing himself, like suicide. And then the way it goes is he took his life. He walked into the sea and let his veins out in it. The father was devastated because he had lost his last male heir, but because he loved Pole. Pole was good and competent and strong in all but standing up to his family. But the suicide also bewildered the Duke. Why had he killed himself in such a way? He was a good son of Sath, not a fish smacker, as those who sit safely inland call the followers of two-tailed Mithranor. What father did not know, and what I did not bother to tell him, was that Seagunth General, blah, 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 the niece of the Duke, had been Pole's lover, and it seems his greatest and only true love. And then he's like, on a rocky beach she had described to him as her favorite, is where he took his life. I have been to this place. It is beautiful. So this idea of like these beautiful opportunities being missed and Pole's looking back on it with regret. He'd been the dutiful son, done everything
Hmm.
right on paper. And Galva had been there and been like, this is beautiful. It's another version of the same cautionary tale between Galva and Pole and Miged of like taking on that same theme of finding this moment in your family situation. You could abuse it, you could stick to it and lose yourself, or you could find your own path.
Hmm. That's really well said there, Charles. Well, you mentioned wanting to get into the villains a bit. We've
Hmm.
talked some about Megid, or
Hmm.
however we say it,
Yeah.
and I would call him the of all things, even with these flesh-eating goblins going on, I would say Megid is the very clear, like, top antagonist
Yeah.
here.
Isn't that
And
some crap? You've
yeah,
got
well, it's
literally the most evil sons of bitches out there, and you're still fighting your own brother.
yeah. I mean, and part of how Buehlman illustrates this is there's moments at the end, right, where she walks in and basically like stops like a rape is occurring that
Hmm.
she then like breaks up, and it's like there's a line kind of like the one atrocity that these goblins don't commit upon
Oh,
us, like
yeah,
the
yeah.
one thing that is below even them, we
Yeah.
are now doing to ourselves. And because the goblins don't do that, they actually, this is kind of an interesting like point about the goblins. Sorry, my cat sucks is like so upset that I'm not showing him attention right now. um Come here, sucks. Okay. So it's like the goblins see people as they use the word cattle, and I think the synopsis that you wrote at one point in the book, they end up describing it as like, imagine if we were just fighting these like anthropomorphic chickens that we could like just eat after we kill them and stuff like that. You remember that, Charles?
Say that
The
again?
it's like when they're talking about what it's like for the goblins to fight people.
Mm,
I forget who it was, but someone says, maybe it was Paul. Either way, someone's like, imagine if we were fighting just like chickens that were running around wielding weapons, like giant
right.
chickens, like poultry. And how we would see them in terms of our enemies, like that's how the goblins see us. They're just like, oh, they're food that like fights with weapons and stuff like that. um and then in some ways that makes the human characters like me get worse, because they know exactly what they're doing, and they're doing things that are in some ways like more malevolent than a creature that just sees people as food that happens to fight against them a lot harder than a chicken or a cow might. So it's kind of interesting then the way that Miguel dies is uh, she basically leaves him for to be goblin food,
Yeah.
and she goes on to describe the like what she hoped happened, and she's like, I hope he like at first was kind of joking and then like realized, oh no, like these people don't care about my last name or who I am. Like they see me as no different than bacon, I think is what she says.
Right.
And it's like, to me, that was an amazing line, first of all. But it's like, it illustrates the difference between what makes like Miguel the clear biggest villain,
Yeah.
and what makes the goblins, while they're clearly villains and we hate them and all this kind of stuff, like less malevolent because they're just taking you to slaughter. They call it like the butcher and stuff like that.
Right.
So yeah, Miguel somehow rises above uh, the goblins as the chief
Right.
antagonist,
And
and
I
then he ends
think,
up.
yeah,
Yeah,
no,
go ahead.
you're so well said, Dylan. I think that's part of Christopher Buehlman's horror background weaving in so
Hmm.
well because it's almost like there's a lot about the goblins as a reader that makes me uncomfortable, right? It's like obviously this idea of there's not like a goblin in this story that we know by name. It's like, oh, the Goblin
Yeah,
King. He's just evil for evil's sake. He wants to rule humanity. No one knows. They don't talk, they can't talk to them. It's just this force
they're just
that's
hungry.
they're just coming in, taking the
They're hungry.
land, building their cities, and eating the people. You know, it's like
Yeah,
you could say the same thing about human beings, like bulldozing down a forest and building a settlement and hunting for
right.
food. It's like literally the same thing, except we can go to war in ways that like other animals can't. So it's like you can
There
turn
was a
that
kangaroo war at one
there
point, I
there
think.
was and I think we lost that war or I forget how that war went. We
Can't win
lost the
them
battle
all.
maybe. Can't win them all, but it's imagine that, you know, like imagine if like cows could fight back or
Well,
sheep
that's what I was
or
saying. That's what's described at one point in the book
yeah.
is like they see us the way we would see if like like just giant chickens were fighting us with weapons.
Right, because it's so clear that they have an agenda and they work almost like as a single consciousness and they're just this force of like their brutality is not because they hate humans so much, it's just they're an animal for slaughter. You know, they
Yeah,
put them in carts and like breed them to be docile or will cut a their tendons so that they can't run, like we clip a bird's wing. You know, they do all of these things that we do to other animals all the time. And it's not anything personal. It's like we hate chickens. It's just, it's convenient for us. We are trying to, you know,
yeah,
progress our society. And so there's that uncomfortable truth about it. It also makes them kind of faceless. And it does two things. One, it kind of unites humanity in this story, which is inspiring. But on the other side, it's like you still have people like Miguel committing crimes and causing conflict internally. It's like even when we are united against a common foe of pure evil, we still can't put our differences aside and we still can't like treat each other respectfully. Like we still have our shortcomings, and the greater villain is the personal betrayal. Even think in the beginning somewhere, it's like no one knows how to hurt you like family does. Is like a line. I think she was talking more about them
hmm,
calling her pet names and stuff, and at the dinner early on, I think she made a comment like that, and it's true. It's like she's witnessed people being eaten alive. She's witnessed deaths in the hundreds and she's sieges and thinking she was gonna die and like a goblin biting her in the leg and like almost killing her and still the thing she takes most personally is what her brother's done to her, which is
yeah,
also super bad.
yes, that's very true and well said, Charles. I the You know what I wanted so badly by the end of this book? Let me know what you think of
Yeah,
this.
I'm
Just
listening.
like a short story or something written by Christopher Buehlman from the perspective of a goblin. I don't need like a whole book. That would probably be more than we need here. But I just want so badly, and maybe this isn't what Buehlman wants us to have at all, and he's not going to ever do something like this. I want so badly to know, like, what is this like from the perspective of a goblin?
Right.
Like, I think it'd be so. We have some speculations here
Right.
about like they basically see us as fighting cows or chickens, like wielding weapons, and we're just in the way, and we're also food. But
Right.
I would love to have, because there's also these mysteries about them. Like, do they have an actual hive mind sort of thing going for them? Like,
Right.
they build armor. Like, they're very intelligent
Yeah, they have
in their
magic,
own
they have like
way. They've got,
sorcerers, like they
yeah,
build siege machines, they have battle plans, they,
right.
all of those, they lay ambush, they lead pursuit, It's interesting. It kind of brings me back to there's a scene in Blacktongue Thief. I don't think it's a spoiler where they're all captured with a bunch of people. I think they're even on a ship
Yes.
and they're just in a cage and a goblin just comes down because it's lunchtime, picks one out of the cage
Yeah.
and butchers it and eats it. And it's just like,
And by it, you mean you're
a
sounding
human
like
being.
a goblin here, Charles.
But that's what
You're already at,
that's what I'm
yes, in
trying
their
to say.
head.
It's
That
like the
is what, yes.
commitment to that positioning of this is what goblins do. It'd just be like a human if you walk into a chicken coop and pick a chicken and
Right.
eat it for dinner. It's like you're not like you don't have a
Like those
vendetta.
restaurants that have just like the lobsters that you are going
A
to eat
lobster tank.
in
It's
the,
exactly
yeah,
the
in the
same
tank, and you're
thing.
like, that one.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So you don't know the
And what's
motivation.
messed out up too about
Mm,
lobsters, it's actually a thing that I've like personally struggled
mhm.
with lobsters, is they still look exactly like what they looked like when they were alive when you're
Yeah,
eating them.
yeah,
That
totally.
messes with my head. I mean,
You
I was
basically look at the
briefly a
eyes and
vegetarian,
everything.
so
Yeah,
like
yeah.
deep, and by briefly I mean like a year. Like
Mm.
deep down, I would want to be one, but
Oh, I remember
I
that.
am weak. I'm weak. I'm
It's
a
just
weak will, Charles.
it's not
I'm
it's our
no better
society
than
is
the
structured
goblins.
that way. If it was
It
more
is tough.
socially popular to be vegetarian like other countries, then it would maybe be a lot easier. But
It's tough. And I
no,
gained a
I
lot of weight because I was just like eating bread. Like I was like, people are like vegetarian, like you must be eating a lot of vegetables. And I was like, I'm just like eating a
just
preposterous
carbs.
amount of pasta. Yeah. So it was a rough go, but
Yeah,
I do
yeah.
look at this and I'm
No, yeah,
like,
it's
I
tough.
am no better than the goblins.
No, I'm the
Maybe
same way. I
slightly,
mean, in my house,
but
we eat like we don't eat a lot of red meat. Like red meat is special occasions only, and so it's just because you make those changes, but it's like that's the enemy, and there's this horror component of just like there's something inevitable about when a goblin is like, oh, it's lunchtime and coming down the stairs and
yeah.
opening the cage. It's just like it's gonna happen. And it's so mirrored to something we know and understand and have accepted in our own society. And so to have that reflected as this villain
Hmm.
is super interesting. The other thing I wanted to highlight in this is a story about war. And there are a lot of battles between humans and goblins. And it goes into all the siege techniques and battle techniques. Did you manage to catch the Christopher Buehlman's like thank yous and credits in the story?
No,
So
no.
here's something that I think you'll appreciate. There's the honors at the end, and it goes, for matters military in this book, I conferred with the brilliant author and historian, Christian Cameron. He
Yes.
generously lent me his hard-won experience reenacting classical and medieval warfare, as we enjoyed a discussion about how goblins might overcome their crisis of size in massed armored combat against humans. So there
I
you
would
go.
love so much to be a fly on the wall listening to Christopher Buehlman and Christian Cameron chopping it up about like military strategy. And from our Christian's probably the guest. Do you think Christian's the guest we've had on our show the most? That's
He's
I
been
would
on
say
it
probably.
3, maybe 4 times.
Yeah.
So yeah,
So
definitely.
we, as you can probably tell, we love hearing from Christian. It's no wonder he's got so much expertise and all that. That it's no wonder it was done so well in Buehlman's book after talking to Christian.
Absolutely.
Cool.
And I remember reading those moments of like, yeah, the goblins, they'll pile themselves on top of each other.
Yes.
And that's another thing that's unsettling and scary about goblins. It's kind of funny is the fact that they will work together and sacrifice the self for the preservation of
Yeah.
society, which is so not human, right? It's like they'll just jump on top of each other and make a wall and charge at each other. And they don't care if 100 of them die as long as they
Yeah.
break through the wall. And that's scary because as humans
Right,
we're like
because that's what the
we don't
pragmatist
understand.
was basically
Yeah,
trying to most closely simulate with
yeah,
humans, but that is preposterously hard to do because we are so much more likely, we're not a hive mind.
yeah, right.
The pragmatist was basically trying to send the message of like, if we all are totally cool with dying, and that's how we treat our warfare, less of us, like ironically, less of us will die. So
Yeah,
we should do that. But that is a
hmm
very hard sell when each individual person is like, but I still don't want to die me.
yeah.
Like, I still kind of don't want to personally deal with that. But the goblins, the pragmatists would have loved the goblin, like
Commanding the
commanding the
goblins, yeah,
goblins.
she would
Yeah.
have laid a waste to humanity. But it's just those kind of tactics that are interesting. There's like the shield wall moments, and then there's they're digging under the tunnels to lay siege. Like there is some fun military aspects to this, and I can see Christian Cameron's suggestions and influence, like certain details that we're paying attention to that are like, oh, that's kind of funny that this is the guy who does writing fighting is now
Yeah.
doing a hypothetical goblin character fighting who's shorter and
Yeah.
who's not as like emotionally motivated. They're just like pure. We keep saying hive mind. They relate to it. It's like that's what they speculate, but we don't know.
We don't
And
know. Yeah.
but it's possible, but we don't know. But they act that way
That's why I want the short story. I would just want like to
But
give me
part
like
of the
20
horror is not
pages.
knowing,
I
not being
know, I
able
know.
to
That's
communicate
why
and find out.
right.
That's
That's
the
why
commitment, we'll call it, to the characters of the story.
yeah, that's why was saying that maybe this is not at all what Christopher Buehlman would like to provide us with. But I'm so
I would
curious.
say
And if
it's a
he's ever
deliberate
like
choice.
done, yeah, I mean, right, that's the whole thing about horror movies. Like it's scarier before you've seen the monster or whatever,
Hmm
right?
hmm
The what you can fill in with your own fears is so much scarier than actually knowing the answer. So I understand it, and Buellman's horror background is on full display, but
hmm
my curiosity is very high when it comes to what would it be like to be a goblin? How are they seeing us? How are they? What's going on with the hive mind stuff? Is that really a hive mind? Are they really just all very pragmatic? Would be the
hmm
word I'll use, I
Yeah,
guess, in their approach to military, and we don't know. So
correct.
would you want the short story or not?
I mean, I feel like it works against the purpose of the story, so that part of me is like it's better without it. But of course, I want to know, like, and I would read it 100%.
Yeah,
So I have it like dueling that way. But if Christopher
you're of
Buehlman
two
decides he's
minds.
going to write a goblin story, short story, I would trust in that and I would embrace it fully. I would be surprised, but I'd be like, let's see why he decided to do this now, you know. But
Jeez, I'd
we
love to
do
have
get there's
Buellman on
some of it.
to
Like I don't know
talk.
if they
By the way,
actually have a dialogue in Blacktongue Thief, but I do remember there's wizards and they were like taking over a ship. I don't think there's necessarily an exchange of words though. I can't fully
I feel
remember.
like they might talk at some. Remember
It's
that scene in the
possible.
Blacktongue Thief that was like the tug of war scene with the
Hmm.
goblins? And
I
do you remember this?
vaguely, my retention is sadly scarier than I thought of the Black Tongue Thief. I guess it was like 2 years ago or a year ago
Yeah,
that we read that story.
there's basically like a sort of tug of war that
I
goes
loaned my
on
copy.
between the goblins and the humans, and like the goblins are trying to like pull people over, um,
Hmm.
I think to eat them. Uh,
Probably.
but I
That's
feel
what they
like
do.
at points, yeah, at points I feel like they might have had some small communication. But it's interesting with the goblins is like we're used to these kind of things in fantasy being more mindless, I guess, like
Uh-huh.
less willing to sacrifice on parts of the like greater than the whole and all that kind of stuff. Like I think of like orcs, right? Like
Mm.
that's kind of the Tolkien orcs would be like the classic version of these like
Yeah.
hordes of enemies that but the orcs they have their version of the goblin king, right? They have
Yeah.
their big bad that's overseeing all of it and commanding them, and they're also just like more dumb and they
Yeah,
don't
and they're
in
like
themselves have,
corrupted
yes, they're
creatures
corrupted, they're
made
like
to
evil
serve
at
a
their
dark
core,
lord, and they
yeah.
don't exclusively they like eat other stuff. They'll eat people too. It's like mentioned that they'll eat them, but they never do
Well,
in the
weren't they
story.
going to? Wasn't that like a very,
They were going to eat Merry and
isn't that a
Pippin.
very classic? Yeah, isn't there like a classic line about that?
That's
It's
where they eat
like
each other. That's
they,
meat's back on the
oh,
menu,
meat's back on the
boys,
menu.
because
Yeah,
they killed one of their. They were in an argument and they eat each
right.
other. That's what that was. But that was argument over eating Merry and Pippin. It's like, what about their legs? They don't need those. Like trying to like, which is scary for sure. They are scary, but there's just these slight like distinctions in the way Buehlman will portray goblins as enemies that makes them just a little bit scarier.
Yeah,
The
there's a
restraint
bumbling
there.
nature to the orcs that
Yeah,
kind of, even though they're very like skilled in combat or whatever, there's just
yeah,
still this sense of like there's these big like bumbling bozos that
yeah,
are scary, but
yeah.
they're also stupid. Like the goblins don't come off like that at all. They're like
No.
mass, like in their own way, like maniacal and like. Anyway, yes,
Anyway,
goblins,
there you
goblins
go.
scary.
Goblin's scary, Goblin's bad. If you take anything away from this book, forget the personal growth, the psychology, the themes of gender and society, or self-worth, or finding happiness in
Right,
life. Goblin's bad is kind of the
goblins bad.
Goblin's bad is the big takeaway there. And
If
so,
you
I
come away from this book thinking Goblin's good,
were you even
I
paying
think,
attention?
yeah, you might have misinterpreted some aspects.
I think so. Although you could say that like maybe they are a better society and deserve to rule because they don't hurt each other the way humans hurt each other. But
That we did talk some about that. I feel we covered
we
that,
did.
but
We
still,
did. But
Goblin's
if you were
bad.
going to make the pro-goblin case, you would have to
Uphill
basically
battle.
say human society doesn't deserve to exist, which is a tough stance to take.
That's a tough sell.
Yeah, that's a
Yeah,
tough
that's a
stance.
tough sell.
But I
What do
that
you
is
wait, Charles?
yeah.
What do you think of we get it's not really a separate point of view, but I feel like we didn't really
Mm,
discuss her,
Emil's
yeah, her brother
journal.
Emil's like the epistolary part of this whole thing. Yeah, what do you think of having this other character that is, their story is kind of being told and then it's just cut off, which is
Yeah,
part of the like realism of the book
yeah,
that I appreciated, where it's like in a typical cohesive story, you wouldn't be like, I'm telling the story of this, like, it's like a Bildungsroman, Charles. It's a
yeah,
Bildungsroman,
yeah,
isn't it?
yeah,
And then it's just like, what if in like, the first quarter of one's Bildungsroman, you just got killed by goblins and your body was never even really found. Like
right.
you were just
Well,
probably
yeah, I
eaten.
think that's interesting. I think that also is like we said earlier, like the way Buellman structured the narrative is so brilliant because you're able to get another POV without necessarily having to write another POV.
Yeah.
It's still kind of Galva's character. It's like I'm showing you these notes that I found from my brother. Here you go. And there's even one it's like, of course, while I flirted with Serene one or she with me, Emil was making his way north as well. Here's what he says of his journey. Like she doesn't even attempt to interpret it. She's like, here. You
Hmm.
want it? Here it is. And that kind of speaks to her character also, because it would have been easy for her to just say, I found his note. This is what he said. This is how I felt about it. This is
Yeah.
how I interpreted it. But it's not. So I think it's kind of a unique way to progress the story and give details of thing outside of Galva's direct experience without having to go through the trouble of another POV. I think one of the main things was like how Galva got the shield. That was kind of the main thing. And also just to get another perspective of the family dinners and the family
Yeah.
drama, like to see what someone else in that same room thought thinks of Miguel and Paul and even of Galva herself. I even think at one point Galva's like, "This is embarrassing. Like I'm going to skip this" when he tries to talk about
Right.
her. So it's kind of
Where she's like,
fun.
I'm not sharing this because of the part where he
Oh
says
yeah,
these
yeah,
good
that was
things
it.
about me. Like
Yeah, yeah. That's not
that's
why.
not my reason.
Yeah.
Like,
In which she felt compelled. The fact that she was compelled to say that speaks
yeah.
volumes about her character, right? It's one thing to say that she gets uncomfortable saying nice things about herself or hearing things about herself. It's another to actually just have that honest moment. So I think it pays off in those ways. I would say the main one is the origin of the shield, and also Fulvia the magician as well is a bigger character in is a big character in the Blacktongue Thief as well. So to have that connection is an interesting one. And yeah, it was some of those moments are funny where the magician's like, "Oh, I've made you invisible. You have to take off your clothes and go." And then
Oh yeah,
it
that
turns
was
out he
funny.
didn't actually make him invisible at
Yeah.
first, and it was funny. And it's like, okay, I'll make you invisible now, that you understand, So he's written in these moments, injected some humor into it without having to compromise Galva's experience because the moments that she had of humor with like what's his name, Hans the Fool, who I love, by the way. That one of my
Yeah.
favorite moments was when he tells the story of like trying to trying to get in bed with her.
Right. It's like, oh, you sleep with, right, sleeping with a dwarf brings on like better something with the crops or something like that, right?
Right, right. He
He
tells a
says that,
super long story, which
yeah,
when you get to the chapter, it's literally no paragraph breaks.
yeah.
Just this long, 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 long,
Oh
long,
my,
long, 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 long
this is wild.
story of like 2 pages long of him
Yeah.
telling the story all about how his difficulties of being like a little person. He had to pretend to be a goblin. He was abused by his former owner. And he goes, uh, what did he say here? Okay. These are just the things we can expect here in this world, most of us. And those of us in the shit like to know that somewhere someone isn't in the shit. And every time I drink a good glass of wine or eat a pastry or bed a whore or a priestess of Nareen, I do it not with hardness in my heart towards those who suffer. I do it in gratitude that there is something, excuse me, besides suffering. He looked me deeply in the eyes and said, Now, Galva Dumbraga, before you go to your stable bed, would you like to be my lover for the sake of the crops? And then Galva says, I do not know what expression I wore when I said, What? Three exclamation points. No. I mean, question marks. No. But he smiled a devil's smile and said, No, that is your answer? Yes, I said. And before I could correct this, he said, Well, which is it? Is it yes or no? It is no, I said. And I think I was half crying and half smiling at the same time. So, he said, looking very sad, You mean I made up that horrible fucking story for nothing? Which is what a
There goes the
great.
family friendly nature of
We're
our
an
show,
hour,
Charles.
20 minutes in. No one's going to care. You're allowed a couple F bombs on YouTube. As
You
long
are.
as they're not
What
in the
about
first minute or too many in a row, you're good.
interesting?
You're considered cool. But yeah, I just that moment I was like, Buehlman's a freaking master, man. He's so funny and like he tells that part about like just there is something besides suffering in enjoying a moment and taking it where you can get it, and then just to acknowledge that this whole story was just this winded thing,
Yeah.
and being able to laugh at that is also like speaks to the artistry as well. It kind of reminds me of even someone like Patrick Rothfuss who's willing to say like make jokes about the writing and the craft and like kind of go in that direction of like making fun of it it isn't
Yeah.
part of what makes it like super enjoyable for me. So he's like, I told this whole story for nothing. Like this is a horrible, the
That
whole
was funny.
horrible story. Like it's like that story was
Yeah.
bad that I just told you.
Yeah. That's pretty funny. And Charles, any other? I'm thinking just like moments worth bringing up. There was I mean, we don't have to get into it, but I was struck pretty hard by um Charles. What's the name of the corvid that got
Bellu
killed? Bellu,
or
Bellu,
Belu, Bellu, however you want to say that.
Belu. Either way, that death was pretty tragic. I felt like, and those are always hard to see when the animal companion goes down like that. Just
Especially in such
the
a cruel
corvids in
way. Yeah.
general. Yeah.
Like the
The corvids.
ignorance of Miguel to do that.
Yeah.
The betrayal of that runs a lot deeper than just the act of the bird
And
getting
then
killed.
her other bird was Belu bad? Like Belu bad?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And Galva's like trying to explain, like, no, no, like, because bad is like a
Yeah.
very, like the bad
And
good distinction is very big for the birds. Like,
and what's
and
also
when a
sad is
bird gets
building up to
killed,
that,
yeah,
they train them that humans are good. Like, do
yeah,
not commit violence against humans. So when the animal's getting stabbed by a human, it's not even registering what's happening. Like if you were to
it won't
abuse
fight
a sweet,
back.
innocent
Yeah.
puppy, it's like, what's going on here? Like, aren't we all like it doesn't
It
understand.
refuses to fight back.
He refuses
If
to
it
fight
were,
back.
yeah,
Yeah. And so it's just like such a horrible, sad moment. It kind of brings me back to like remember in Game of Thrones and this not really a spoiler, but with like the direwolf
the
lady
direwolf,
and all the
yeah,
drama they got into early in that. I mean, they hit different, they're different stories, but it brings me to that where it's like the injustice of a death of an animal,
yeah.
you know, it's just tough. You remember those moments, and I remember poor lady. But yeah.
Hey, maybe they'll resurrect Lady now that dire
Yeah,
wolves
if we can get some of that
are
lady
back in the
DNA,
world.
where direwolves are back in
And
business, baby.
yeah,
So, yeah, that was a standout moment. We didn't get too much into all of Galva's romances, but I think that's part of her discovery of herself. She's got like her commander that she develops this like companion bond with, and then she's got her flings, and then she falls in love with the Queen Maria, Mireya, Miria,
Maria.
and
It's like
Maria.
Maria.
I don't know,
The
but
names are tough in this one.
the names are tough, but yeah, those are kind of fun, and I know that um the romance angle of this would be a positive one for a lot of people, the representation and the
Yeah,
and it is woven into her theme of like being a woman who likes women, like that kind of forms her path in this society. So,
yeah,
but other than that, I'm trying to think of like moments. I mean, those are the big ones. The naked scene was funny.
yeah.
Um,
I thought we touched on a lot of the. I mean, comment on YouTube if you have other favorite moments or things
the
you feel like
shield.
we
I know that
missed.
there's like the
Right.
shield is such a big part of her character and the Blacktongue Thief
Yeah,
and like the origin of how that
true.
came to her is a big one. The fact that she never tried to claim it. The dad wanted her to have it, which is something she never knew until later. Was another interesting element. The fact that her brother stole it for her and died trying to deliver it to her
Yeah,
is an interesting element as well. The one brother that she felt the most connected to, the
yeah,
most innocent, the one least likely to go to battle and die, who the whole reason he was sent to be with the wizard was to be safe and to, you know, learn something, you know, the
yeah.
cost of
That
that shield.
Yeah, that's true. And that's another moment of like why the realness of the story where it's just like there's no moment where he gets the shield to her and then he's being grabbed by goblins and she takes the
It's
shield
not
and
like
he's
the
pulled
Avengers where
away.
it's like
It's like
it calls it and
there's
it's like Corvid Knights assemble and then they kill
no.
Thanos. It's like not what happens.
No, she just sees someone else with the shield and she's like, "Did you see like this boy?" And like she gets in such a roundabout way where she's able to connect the dots as to what happened, but we don't get this dramatic moment around it. We don't get the I mean, I also thought her not being able to kill Mehead herself was like a moment that
Mm.
I mean, I don't know. Maybe that is more satisfying to have him killed by the goblins, but I feel like the more typical thing would be like she gets, her vengeance or whatever. Like there's a few moments that Buehlman intentionally
Yeah.
passes up because he wants to maintain
Yeah.
this
And Miguel
how
never
real it
acknowledged
feels and
that she should have the shield. Like there was never
yeah,
that moment. Yeah, no, that's well said. It's definitely left to the horrors of his own device. Like he chose to settle here. This is what he's gonna have to deal with. I don't
mm,
want to have to kill him. And why should I have that
yeah. She
on me?
accelerates the process because she rings
Oh
the
yeah, for
bell,
sure. I
but
mean, she's complicit in it, but it's not
yeah.
like she had to like take that action. So,
Yeah.
um, yeah, man, this
Hmm.
this was a fun one. This is like the Christopher Buehlman experience that had me read two other ones like outside of the show. The thing that pulls me in from him is just like there's something more clever and more poetic going on than what's on the surface. I can sink my teeth into the prose. I just appreciate the artistry of it. And I don't know if
For
Daughter's
sure.
War will rise up to the accolades of the Blacktongue Thief. Like the reviews like the number of them is a bit
Hmm.
diminished. It is a prequel. It is like making that less popular decision to not have the fan favorite character and to not be humorous and like not be embracing of that like Abercrombie Scott Lynch kind of tone that propelled that
Hmm.
story. But I just love it all the same. Between Two Fires is very similar about a knight who's just trying to get by in a world that's taken over by more zombie-like creatures. It is also kind of White Walker vibes, like the enemy, where it's just
Mm.
like this mass enemy that you don't understand, but is coming for humanity. Um, so yeah, I'm just a huge fan. I'll continue to read what he puts out. There's one on his bibliography that I wanted to read, Those Across the River. It's another like um, horror story. It's not fantasy at all, but it gets a lot of accolades. And one of his earlier works, if not his first, I think it may be his first published work. So that's the one that's like high on my TBR. But I'd say people who like this, Between Two Fires, is pretty similar actually. And then in tone, but then the Blacktongue Thief has got that slightly different tone to it. So I respect an author willing to make those changes. It would be so easy to be like Blacktongue Thief number 40. Kinch continues to be sassy and like, just ride that train to the grave. But he goes with what inspires him, and I'll always appreciate that.
Yeah. I think we've had uh I don't think he talked about it on our show, but at some point Mark Lawrence talked about the idea. I think this was Lawrence talking about like, yeah, if I just kept writing like Jorg's adventures, like
Yeah,
Jorg 4, Jorg
right,
5, like
exactly,
if he's
exactly.
like that probably would have been the most like financially prudent decision for my
Yeah,
authorial career. But like at a certain point, uh, like you've told the story that you want to tell, and or in Buellman's case, I guess you hadn't told the story you felt like you needed to tell about Galva yet, and now we can continue with the Blacktongue Thief, and we can get Blacktongue 3 or 2 or whatever it is.
yeah, whatever
I
you
think they
call it.
have this as listed as Blacktongue number 0, the Daughter's War. So I guess that'll be Blacktongue number 2,
Yeah,
uh, Kinch's the return of the sassiness
I
from.
look forward to that. And also, oh man, I'm forgetting the name of the cat. Billy something. Billy
Oh,
Boy.
Billy Boy, Billy
Yeah,
Boy.
I did. I remember when Buellman was tweeting, this was years ago, when he announced that he was working on a prequel starring Galva. And then I remember like replying to that tweet and being like, "What about Billy Boy?" And he's like, "Oh, I'm coming back to Billy Boy." And then I was like, "Billy Boy returns," and he liked it, so it's
Oh, you had
confirmed.
a little
We
exchange,
had a
huh?
little exchange back in the day, and I did like a little meme. You know how at the end of like the original like Iron Man or something, or it would be like Iron Man will return in this.
Yes,
I took one of those and I crossed out the superhero name and I put Billy Boy and posted it, and he liked it. So I was
that's
like,
good.
Billy Boy will return in
Well
Blacktongue
done.
Thief 2. So there you go,
Well done. I'd love
confirmed.
to have Buehlman on the show at some
Oh
point.
yeah,
We
I
can
would love to as well. And we could
talk
sing
more
"Rah
about that
Rah
off
Billy
the air.
Boy Rah." I remember that was a song. Was that the cat's name though? Now I'm doubting myself because that
I
was the
thought,
song
yeah, but I think maybe the cat was named
named
after the
after.
song. I
I
think.
think so. So, man, it'd be
Yeah.
tough if we got it wrong. But I'm confident enough to move on with that. But yeah, there you go, guys. Daughters War. Dylan, anything else before we get that outro music going?
No, I think it's time to get that sweet, sweet outro music pumping, Charles.
All
Bully
right,
boy, bully boy,
oh, Bully Boy. Yeah,
bully
not
boy,
Billy
not
Boy.
Billy boy.
Bully Boy. Okay, we were close.
But I think the cat is named after the song. Like I think
Yeah,
Bully Boy was
yeah.
but
He
it's
was
Bully
making a
Boy.
joke in his Kinch Shannon ways.
Yes.
Nick Shannon ways. All right, let's get that outro music pumping. Thank you, everyone, one and all, for listening to yet another very exciting episode of the Friends Talking Fantasy podcast. If you like what you heard today, if you want to support the show, let us know what you think down in the comments. Give us a like and subscribe. Follow us on all the socials.
Ring that
all
bell
good
like
stuff.
your Galva.
Ring that
like Galva trying to get her not brother murdered. Ring that bell.
Get the only way we're gonna get that goblin swarm coming in is if you ring that bell, guys. So go ahead and make that
FTF
happen.
hive mind.
FTF hive mind. Let's freaking go, man. Just like everything that we say, agree with us on everything, watch all the videos. So that would be perfect. So thank you for that in advance. And now, Dylan, if they've joined the hive mind, if they've watched the show, they've given us that like, that subscribe, and they want to support the show even further than that, what can they do?
Toss 5 stars to our podcast, which you can do over on Spotify. You can also rate and review on Apple Podcasts. That's always appreciated when you say some nice things about us. You can follow us on Instagram at the FTF Podcast. And I'm really strongly thinking about Blue Sky. You know,
Ooh, you've been teasing the Blue Sky, man. Is it gonna happen?
Yeah. It could. We'll see. I hear good things about Blue Sky, but you don't have to rate us 5 stars. You don't have to follow us on Blue Sky, especially because we don't have one yet. Because just watching or listening is more than enough. Thank you so much for doing that.
Well said, Dylan. Guys, thank you so much. I don't know what's happening with the outro music.
Music stopped.
Whoa, okay. We're back.
Can they hear
Well,
this?
guys, this is it. Thank you all so much for watching. You guys are the best. And as always, go forth and conquer, friends.
Friends Talking Fantasy will return in some other episode of Friends Talking
Friends Talking Fantasy will return in Friends Talking Fantasy episode almost 300.
I guess it's Dylan and Charles will return.
Okay, Dylan, yeah, well, we will return. Fear not,
In Friends Talking Fantasy. Episode whatever.
295 or something. This is 295.
I figure out what to do for 300.
We are getting close. So, thank you all. Thank you. And say it again, as always. Go forth and conquer, friends. Okay, so something interesting was happening where your
Oh, no.
microphone wasn't